Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all the ships at sea. This is Two Old Bucks, Episode 8, final season broadcast. I'm Dale.
And I am Dave.
I want to send out some holiday greetings to everyone and wish everyone a Happy New Year. And to remind everybody out there, this is about friendship. So if you have an old friend, remember you can talk about them when they're gone, but it's best to talk to them while they're here.
There you go.
So check in on those old friends, say hello to them. And this is Two Old Bucks. Now we're going to talk about.
Yeah, speaking of old friends, what about old books that are friends? Have you? I think you mentioned a book you read recently. You wanted to
what
endorse.
made me go hum?
Yeah.
The reason I went hum about this one is because I mentioned it passingly, and the whole everybody within earshot said, "I read that. That was a great book." I would suspect a lot of our readers probably, or our listeners probably, have read this book, but this book is called "All the Light You Cannot See." "All the Light You Cannot See" by Anthony Doerr, or is that, how do you pronounce that last name?
I think Doerr.
Doerr,
yeah,
D-O,
like the thing on the wall.
E-R-R.
Thing you walk through. Yeah.
Yeah. "All the Light You Cannot See." Very interesting story. I picked it up because you can't tell a book by its title, so it was one of them chance things, but I'd recommend that. You'd say you read it too, didn't you, Dave?
I did. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was a great book.
So did you think it was, did you think it would go the way it went?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, it was really,
Couldn't jump
really
ahead
well
mentally?
done. Really well done. It made you think about
Yeah,
life.
could not jump ahead mentally and
Yep.
predict the outcome.
Made some abrupt left turns. Yeah.
And if I'm correct, there was no lawyers, right? There was no lawyers in this book, were there?
I'm not a lawyer, so if you're going to pick on lawyers, you're wasting your time.
There's no lawyer in the book. Either there's a lawyer or a detective, and it wasn't this.
Correct.
Anyhow,
anyway,
if you're listening out there, pick that up and take a look at that one. I think you'll enjoy that. So,
I have a holiday gift I want to talk about also.
This is something you saw on Craigslist?
Well, this was sent in. Normally we save letters from afar.
Oh, sent in?
Yeah, this was a picture sent in. It was a picture of a product. This is Lucy from Chester, Pennsylvania. Now, she sent me this picture of this. Now, there's going to be a linkage here to Tidy Cat containers ultimately.
Oh, okay.
All right, so she sent me this picture. It's called Nature's Miracle Just for Cats. Calming spray. Stress-reducing formula. So it's like it's a 6-ounce plastic squeeze bottle, or with
an aerosol can.
Aerosol. Oh, it's not air. I mean, it's plastic and pump spray on the top. Okay. And like calming spray for cats.
Did you think about the implications of having something like that?
Exactly. I was wondering, boy, this is what we need for people. Forget the cats. And
you remember that can of Whip something? You could spray it. Don't make me take out that can of Whip something, and So.
Well, I thought this was just an incredible product, and there's opportunity for growth here. But did
it give you a sell price?
Well, it doesn't, because she says I use this all the time now. And she went on. Now let me.
It's real.
It's real. Here's a picture. See, okay.
Oh, there it is.
The rest of you can't see it, but I'm showing them a picture on my phone of this calming spray. She says, I have repurposed this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I make my own hand sanitizer, and I dispense it from this. She says, it's just like the Tidy Cat container repurposing. She says, I have repurposed calming spray, and she says it's a good conversation starter with the neighbors when they see her rubbing calming spray.
I get it. So the calming spray essentially is a legitimate product that somehow can calm a cat down?
Allegedly, yeah.
But
I don't know. I've never been a cat.
You repurpose the bottle and spray it on your hands, and it's actually hand sanitizer.
And now it's hand sanitizer.
Everyone thinks, wow, what are you using this?
Okay,
Oh, man. Far out.
Far out, dude. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, you had something more serious you wanted to talk about. You mentioned to me.
Yeah.
All you said something about two Russian heroes. Is that what?
Yeah.
All right, tell me more about
I'd like to point out two Russians who basically saved the world, I believe.
This is a true historical account?
This is a 1 minute history here. The first Russian I want to talk about is Vasily Arkhipov. He was a Soviet naval officer, and he's credited with preventing a Soviet missile strike and probably thermonuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of '62. Now, he was second in command on a Soviet sub in the water near Cuba. They'd been out of contact with Moscow for several days. A U.S. ship began dropping depth charges on them to get them to surface, not to injure them. These were light charges, but it was like that's the signal, like you guys need to surface and come up. So the captain of the ship thought that
I didn't know we did that.
Yeah, the captain. I didn't know that either till I was reading up on this. So the captain of the sub thought, okay, war has broken out. These guys are attacking us. We haven't heard from Moscow. Maybe that's why we haven't heard from Moscow. So they had a nuclear torpedo or torpedoes. They had at least one, and he wanted to launch it. Okay.
So this wasn't a surface to air, or surface to surface missile.
A nuclear torpedo.
This is a nuclear torpedo.
Yeah, he apparently wanted to take out the biggest U.S. ship he could find. He said, we may go down, but they're going down with us. Something like that. Anyway, it took the three top officers on the ship had to agree on the launch if they didn't have Moscow approval. Normally, you would want Moscow approval before you did anything like that.
Yeah.
So the captain and the other officer, they wanted to launch, and Arkhipov talked them out of it. He said the captain was ranting and raving, and he was really losing it. Arkhipov calmed him down. They talked through it, decided this is not really. I don't think there's really a war going on here. These guys are not trying to kill us. They're just trying to signal us to get up.
So let me set the scene again for anybody who's just joined us or not following this. This is in the 1960s.
62.
62, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Soviet sub was somewhere in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean near Cuba or something, and an American destroyer was dropping some kind of a sonic or sound depth charges to warn these guys that we know where you are, we're following you, and you should surface. And they think it's an indication that the war had already started, but they're taking it to mean that.
Correct.
And they could launch a nuclear-tipped torpedo.
Yes. So that's an excellent synopsis of my synopsis. I got to say that. I'm impressed.
So this guy talked them out of it. How did this become knowledgeable?
Well, it didn't become knowledgeable till the end of the Soviet Union, and all of these records became.
Okay.
So I want to talk about the other Russian who I think saved the world. This was Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov. And September 26, 1983, the Soviet Union's early warning system.
This one I remember.
You remember this one? They detected an incoming multiple missile strike from the U.S. Not one, but they detected 5 missiles coming in from the U.S. Now the protocol was to, kick it upstairs and reply in kind, start launching missiles back, because you only have like 23 minutes or 25 minutes. Yeah. But Petrov was the duty officer at the time, and he thought about it, and he dismissed it as a false alarm, and he did not report it to his superiors even.
That's what made this famous story, I believe, because he simply said, "I'm not reporting this." Yeah.
So he later, he when he did report to his boss, he said, "Well, we had a system malfunction," and that's all. That's basically what he said. And then he waited. he waited 23 minutes to see if Moscow was going to go away, and it didn't. So he was right. And he said he himself was only convinced 50-50. Yeah. See, he was the whole team. He was the only civilian educated officer in the program, in the system. The other guys were all military, and he said, "Look, if one of those guys had been the duty officer with military training, you boom, boom, boom by the books."
The radar screen said it's incoming.
Yeah. So had one of those been there, we wouldn't really be having this chat today. There would have been a World War III.
I wonder how often that happens that we don't know about.
Well,
when somebody's got their hand on the trigger, and
this became known after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now he subsequently he was passed over for promotion. He saved the world, right? But he was passed over for promotion. He ended up retiring early. Actually, in retirement, came to the U.S. and they gave him a tour of one of our missile silos. Yeah, so who would have thunk it? But again, just
these men are both
hats off to both of these guys. You think the Russians were the enemy. These were two really good guys.
They're both dead now, I assume.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Both gone. Yeah.
Interesting. Hey, speaking of Russia, we talked on several occasions. And you gave me some bits and pieces in your work life and in your private life. You did some serious traveling. You were going to tell me something about that. Maybe the folks listening out there would be interested in that.
Yeah, I have done a lot of traveling for my job and off the job as well. I enjoy seeing the world. I enjoy visiting other cultures and trying to figure out how other people look at the world. Different foods, different cultures. It's interesting. It's interesting. So yeah, I've been to Russia twice actually. Once in '92 and then again in 2012. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about. I wrote a story about the 2012 visit to Russia.
As a note, or do you write it for?
Well, I wrote it as a travel essay. I never try to publish it or anything.
Oh.
It never. It's kind of long, but I'd like to read a page or so of that. But
right.
What I'm going to talk about is the Trans Siberian Railway.
The Trans Siberian.
I rode the Trans Siberian Railway. But, I want to give you a little bit. I read a book about the railway. The book is called "To the Edge of the World" by Christian Wolmer. And I'm not going to do a book review other than just take some statistics from the book. It was built in the 19th century. It took a decade to build. It's almost 6,000 miles. It goes from Moscow to Vladivostok on the Pacific. And there's also a connecting line to Beijing called the Trans Manchurian part of it. And then there's also a northern extension that was built during the Brezhnev era. It was primarily built with prisoner labor. These were all the prisoners that were sent to the gulags out in Siberia. And a lot of army labor.
And it's still functional today. I mean,
it's still functional. It played an important role in the Russian Civil War and in the Second World War. The Russians were able to move their industries out east in Siberia to protect them from the Germans. So that was really important. Covers 7 time zones. It goes across mountains, swamps. It even went across a frozen lake, which was not so good in spring or summer. So they had to reroute that one. I think it was an amazing feat of engineering. It cost a lot of lives, but it connected Siberia with the rest of the world. So my experience was in 2012. I took the Trans-Manchurian route from Beijing to Moscow. And I traveled with my wife and her sister, both of whom are fluent in Russian. Because if you're going to travel in Russia, it's really a help.
Especially that far out.
That's a tough language. So it was going to be 6 nights on the train, and then plus 2 days at Irkutsk and Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal, which holds 20% of the world's fresh water. It's incredible. So I wrote a story about the trip, and I'm going to read a short excerpt from it. Now, the train we took was your basic Russian train. Now, if National Geographic had a special a number of years ago about the Trans Siberian Express, blah blah blah, all this luxurious cabins, fine dining. That's not what we went to. Okay, it was just the regular train. We did have first class tickets for part of it and second class tickets for the other part of the train, and but the cabins were fine. But the bathroom had a stainless steel sink and had a stainless steel toilet with no lid or no back, and they had this tiny little toilet paper pieces that you weren't supposed to throw in the toilet. Okay, they had a box on the wall there, and you threw your used toilet
to
paper.
recycle that, or would it do something?
Yeah, so you really needed to have some toilet paper.
Was the cars? They're not wooden, were they? They didn't have wooden trim.
No, I mean they're modern. They're steel. This is this is 2012. So there were 2 bathrooms per car, no shower. So we had we used wet wipes. We gave ourselves wet wipe.
Best you could do with wet
wipes.
Yeah,
that was it. And you were strongly advised, don't you even think about using a bathroom in another car, or we will. Yeah. So anyway, I just want to read about a page and a half. So I talked about our handy wipe routine. So after I'm going to start. This is after we had left Beijing. So this is the morning after our first night on the train.
You're still in China.
We're still in China. After a short night, we were ready to try breakfast in the dining car. But first we met Natasha, our cabin attendant. That was her real name, who explained that she could lock our cabins with her special key so our cabin contents would be safe while we dined. The dining car had clean white cotton tablecloths on the tables, a nice touch. We were handed menus in Russian and Chinese, and they must have had 50 selections on them. But the waiter explained that our choices were rice with pork and onions or rice with pork and peppers. That was every meal. Those were the 2 offerings. They were actually good. They were good. They were fine. Took the anxiety out of trying to understand a Russian menu, or Chinese menu, even worse. So as we headed northeast through the flat Chinese corn and wheat fields, a new instant city seemed to spring up every few hours. When we reached Harbin at 3 p.m. Sunday, 877 miles from Beijing, I counted over 100 tower cranes at work, an incredible testament to China's explosive growth. Natasha explained that Harbin was, quote, the last big city before the wilderness. Just past Harbin, the train swung westward across the Manchurian plains, and the cornfield slowly gave way to low rolling hills covered with scrub grass and yurts visible in the distance. No more instant cities, just dusty outputs along the line. Definitely the wilderness. That evening, Natasha said she would wake us at 3:30 a.m. because there was a stop at 4 a.m. for passport checks at Manjuli, the Chinese border city, and that the bathrooms would be locked. She actually forgot to tell us. She also forgot to mention that the Chinese authorities would keep our passports for over 3 hours after they worked us over with 20 questions, and my bladder is...
And this was trying to get out of China.
We're getting close to the border, so they're going to prep for the border. Okay, and then as we finally departed, this was on the Chinese side, as we finally departed just after daybreak, the landscape was now distinctly rolling brown hills with golden Orthodox domes gleaming in the sun. In less than 10 minutes, we stopped again, this time for Chinese immigration, which was mercifully short. Another 10-minute creep, and we were in Russia, where 3 sturdy female officials boarded the train. One gave me the longest ever passport match. Stand up, move closer, step in hall, sit down. She then marched off with my passport. Now, the bathrooms were still locked, and we seemed to be in some kind of limbo, so I suggested to Val and Lily, the 2 sisters, that they take a corridor walk while I do the handy wipe. Do the handy wipe body swab thing here and change clothes. At the exact moment I was post-wipe and pre-close, the sliding cabin door cracked open. Thinking it was the sisters, I shoved the door closed and told them to wait a minute. Instantly, the door was jerked fully open, and I was staring at two unsmiling uniformed Russians. "Unholy," which means he's naked, screamed the woman, while her male counterpart did a couple double takes and shouted, "Get out, get out." So they let me close the door partially, and I dressed, and they did a strip search of our cabin. Shortly afterward, Lily discovered that her rolls of Chinese hotel-grade toilet paper were missing. At 8:30 a.m., the train nudged forward a few hundred yards more and stopped at the train station at the Russian border town of Zabaikalsk, whereupon the passengers were told to leave so they could change the wheels, since Chinese and Russian train lines are a different gauge. So Natasha told us it would take 4 hours, so we had plenty of time to explore the town. What a difference. The main street and the sidewalks were potholed, broken, and crumbling, and many of the buildings appeared ready to collapse. Two basic male character types populated the streets. Young, shaved-head hoodlum hopefuls outfitted in black leather, scowling from their parked cars, and drunken old men in rags stumbling down the street. It was sad, really, watching these young guys stare at their future. Up the street, we found a little restaurant open and ordered tea, soups, and kapusta-filled punchkas from the sweet, round-faced owner. Everything was delicious, and the bill was a whopping $7. And I'm going to stop there. Had a lot of adventures on the train. That was just a couple of things. I could talk more in future episodes if there's any interest whatsoever.
Well, my question was, you say they actually had to change they lifted them up and set another axle underneath them, a wider wheel or narrower wheel.
Yes, yeah. It was I believe the Russian gauge was slightly wider.
So
the reason the Russians adopted a different gauge is they did not. They wanted to avert the risk of being invaded by train from China. So they made the tracks, They made the tracks different gauge, so invaders couldn't get past the
transition that probably goes on daily.
Oh yeah. This was
is a real.
Yeah, it takes several hours.
Yeah.
Interesting
episode in itself.
Yeah, it was. We met some interesting characters that I could talk about in the future. People that Russians, non-Russians traveling. A lot of episodes. A lot of stories from the train. But I will
save some of these adventures for another day, perhaps.
Save some of those for another day. So yeah, it was a great trip. 8 days. Lots of interesting adventures, crazy people that we met along the way.
You taking questions? Can I ask you a question?
You can ask me a question, sure.
Would you do it again?
No, I would not do it again. I did it. Okay.
If somebody was going to do it, you would say, be brave and go ahead and try it if you got the courage to do it.
Yeah, I would say it's an adventure, but it's not. It wasn't always fun. It was always an adventure. It was sometimes very relaxing. You'd sit there, lie there on a bunk and watch the trees go by for hours and hours.
For hours and hours.
Oh yeah, if there was no, we did have power, but there was no Wi-Fi, and
so I should warn the folks that are listening to this who have never crossed borders or hostile borders or any countries that had a pretty rough entry and exit to procedure. You could, if you want to go on an adventure, try that sometime.
That was kind of a tough border crossing there. Getting strip searched.
You got a lot more travel stories to tell. We'll save a few for another day when we get.
Okay.
When something comes up.
Why don't we just move on to, how about letters from afar?
Go ahead. Tell me what you got.
We have, I think we have time for one here. We got 3 or 4 here, but this comes from Mel from Washington, D.C. He says, "Gentlemen," it's a nice start. In episode 5, Dell asks for suggestions of original comedy. I would like to submit Who's on First by Abbott and Costello. It is undoubtedly original. While Dale requested original comedy one might have read, I feel my submission warrants strong consideration, as Dale opened this segment by mentioning I Love Lucy and Friends, both of which were TV shows. Who's on First was originally broadcast as a radio program. I also have a question and suggestion. Have you considered finding a shorter name for the citizens representing alternative positions? It really does consume valuable podcast time to pronounce. So there's a couple for you. So now he's wondering if if we can accept Who's on First as a candidate for the funniest book ever, but it's not a book. But
no,
it's
as far as something. I mean, I was thinking about something you read. There's a lot of original visual comedy, and that certainly qualifies as one of them. Those routines. You could go on and on and on about all the crew, from Jack Benny or whatever, Smothers Brothers, or anybody of that period of the comic heydays, I should say. So I would say he's 100% correct in originality, but
so it's on the list then. It's a candidate.
He's a candidate, but my query was something that had been written and never played off of. In other words, it was such an original story. No one was ever able to duplicate it. It was just it was so, so tightly written that you couldn't copy it without being. Okay, I'll give you an example real quick, and I won't be long. If I was to write a story about a bunch of people getting on a boat and involved a professor and another girl, and and they got lost and stranded on an island,
like a 2-hour cruise.
Yeah, like they went on a 2-hour cruise, and even though the characters were different, and you could say no, you just modified an original. That was an original comedy there too, I would say.
Okay.
So I would say yes, he was correct. But anybody out there listening to this, if you read something that was really, really original and never basically varied and duplicated over time into the same format, I'd be curious to know what that was.
And that's BUCKSTWOOLD@gmail.com is where they can tell us that.
Yep.
So any comments on his suggestion for a shorter name? I'm kind of with him on this one, but I think, I'm getting used to it. It's starting to feel comfortable with me.
That's America, right? Citizens representing alternative position. That's pretty much the American guarantee for life, liberty, and the pursuit of what I think.
There we go. We said we're not going to get political here, so let's just keep it happy.
Anyhow,
keep it happy. Anyway, this is the point where we would go to Loser Lotto.
No,
but
this is the last in the series 1.
I thought you said the last one was the last one.
Well, this is officially.
You can't let it go.
I know. Some people they don't get it. They don't mention it, and as an original idea, it was clearly not destined for any kind of longevity. It was never going to become part of the lingua franca.
Nobody ever understood it.
Nobody ever understood it.
I'm not sure you understood it.
Maybe years later when they dig through the archives, they'll say, wonder what Loser Lotto really meant. Otherwise, all you lotto players out there, we wish you the best of luck. And if your newfound wealth works for you, that's all the better. So no more comments about that. Probably we'll discontinue that in season 2.
Hallelujah. All right.
All right, buddy.
So having said that, we are going to say goodbye again. This was another fascinating session with each other and hopefully with you. So we are two old bucks.
Bye.